Welcome back to The Contrary Podcast. I'm Charlie Sexton. We're going to do something a little bit different. One of the things that I try to avoid is I try to avoid getting too much into the weeds of political consultant world, et cetera. But this is an exception. So I wanted to welcome Zee Cohen-Sanchez, who is the founder of the Political Action Committee National Ground Game, which is going head-to-head, now you'll see why I'm doing this, head-to-head with guys like Charlie Kirk on America's campuses. So first of all, welcome to the podcast, Zee.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, now fair warning for everybody. We're going to talk about what's going on with Gen Z, what's going on with Charlie Kirk, what's going on with people like Nick Fuentes on campus. And then I want to talk about something that was known as Unfucked America, and how it got effed up as an indication of part of the problems of progressives who cannot seem to stop fighting with one another despite everything that's going on. Now, I mention this because every once in a while, you have to know that I get comments on my podcast, people saying, hey, like your podcast, but we wish you would swear less. Well, you know, it is called Unfucked America, so we're going to have to do that. Okay, so let's just start off with your organization, Ground Game, is specifically targeted at this mysterious voting bloc, which didn't seem to be mysterious. I think Democrats took youth voters for granted, didn't they? They simply assumed that if you were a young college student, that you were going to grow up and be a Democrat. I mean, this was part of this this demographic fantasy that they had, that you were going to have all of these, you know, this emerging electorate that was going to inevitably give Democrats wins. So give me your sense of what's happening with Gen Z. What is the appeal of Trumpism to this generation, which I have to admit is a little bit opaque to me sometimes?
Yeah, you know, I think that there's multiple reasons I think that we've seen this shift in the youth vote. Obviously, Charlie Kirk, Scott Presler, a lot of these like large organizers, big organizations that they have just been hammering down on voter registration and conversion campaigns. So it's hard to tell right now, at least with the studies that have come out, if they are moving, if the youth is actually moving to the right ideologically, or if they are just simply out organizing us. And I think it could be a combination of both, right? But what we've learned is that, at least what we know, especially from the Nick Fuentes crowd and the Groypers and these folks, right, is that we know that there is a male loneliness epidemic. We know that. We've known that for some time. The issue is that people like Charlie Kirk they're grabbing onto that, and then they're using this, you know, Trump MAGA ideology to pull them in so that they feel like they're part of something. And that's where the danger arises, especially on college campuses, when we have these kids that leave home, they're in a new place for the first time, they already feel isolated for a number of reasons. And now they have their friends and they have their, all of the people in their lives that are gravitating towards these Turning Point USA chapters. And that's where we see that blur happen, where we do see massive shifts to the right, like we saw in the last election, where, you know, we saw the youth vote shift 9 points right in one election cycle.
Is it primarily men? Is it boys? Is it this incel culture? I'm sorry, I threw out incel culture, but I mean, it seems primarily male.
It is primarily male, although it is dangerous for us to not look, I think, at women as well in this space. So because we are losing the youth vote altogether, right? So, but I do think it is driven by males at this point, at least. But we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you know, Turning Point they're expanding every single day.
And they're well funded. I mean, let's put this in some context. I mean, Turning Point USA, this is the Charlie Kirk organization. I mean, they have millions of dollars. Do you have some sense of what their funding is?
Yeah. So Charlie raised about $100 million in 2024. Yeah.
From who? Who's giving Charlie Kirk $100 million?
So this is what I actually found to be very interesting, because originally I thought that all of these folks were just large dollar donors, right? Which would make sense. gets. But no, actually, Charlie has 500,000 individual donors, which that's a huge amount. And so it'd be interesting to see what the average donation looks like. But what we do know is that it's not just all individually billionaire funded. I mean, he does have a very strong base. I think if he lost those really big funders, they would still be taking over the game.
Okay, so I mean, I actually know some. Back in the day when I actually met Charlie Kirk once, I was on a panel with him, and saw his operations at CPAC. And I think at one point I described him to an associate as the kind of person that a 70-year-old right-wing millionaire thinks would be able to appeal to young people. In fact, he has been. So I want to just dive down on this question. So you have a male loneliness problem. Guy like Charlie Kirk, whose appeal is not self-evident, and let's make it very, very clear. The guy is, college dropout, not the sharpest, stick in the drawer. What does he say to young men? Why they should align themselves with Trumpism and MAGA? Does he say that it's okay to be masculine, that it's okay to be men? I mean, where does the trad wife stuff come in? I mean, stuff that was not even on the far reaches of the fever swamp, that men should encourage women to be submissive. I mean, where is this coming from, and how does it work?
So this is what's very interesting is that I feel as if this narrative around, like, I don't know if maybe your viewers have heard that recently Charlie told a 14-year-old girl that the only reason to go to college is to get an MRS degree, right? To essentially go get married. And what's interesting is that Charlie didn't used to have this strong of a rhetoric, because I think that overall he still wants women to come to his organization, right? And when you start sort of using that type of language of okay, well, your only point to go to college is just find a husband and forget the career or whatever, that is going to isolate some women from his movement. But I think that what they're finding is that because they're giving these people, all of them, not just men, but all people, sort of a place, it is less about what he's saying and more about just giving them that community and that space to grow. So for example, when we were talking to a lot of the kids at the Student Action Summit, we said, well, what draws you towards Trump and what draws you towards Charlie Kirk? And most of them told us that they don't really think Charlie's cool, and they actually don't really care that much about Trump. They more so think of this as a vacation for their friends. They get to go out of town, they get to go to Tampa, go on this vacation, they get to network, so their parents encourage it.
They get to meet girls.
Yeah, right? They get to meet girls, right? And so it is very much an ideal setup. And nobody else is doing this. There isn't an alternative on the left that they could look and say, oh, well, I could just join this other organization that's doing it. It doesn't exist. So I think that it's less about, the Trumpism and really about any of the policy, and more so just about that.
Belonging. I heard you mention this on another podcast where you said that there really is, going to your point, that there's no alternative. So there are no progressive. I mean, my view of colleges was, of course, there's a progressive club for everybody, but there's not really an infrastructure, and Democrats in terms of organizing doesn't exist, or is weak.
No, not in the way that. Not in the way Turning Point does it. I mean, there are Democratic clubs that I'm sure on many campuses, and not all of them, but I'm sure many of them. But the problem is that they don't have that Turning Point infrastructure. So they're usually student-led and run. There's not usually a structure to them. There's not a shared goal, things like that. So I don't think that people gravitate as much towards it, because they don't have this oh, let's go on vacation, or let's go to this networking event together. Nothing like that, as far as we know, even exists.
So this is actually working. I guess this is the thing that took a lot of people by surprise, is that you'd hear of Charlie Kirk being out there and he's kind of a goofy sort of guy, not realizing exactly how deep this infrastructure was. And as you point out, they have gone from just sort of having rallies and parties and bake sales and things like that to actually organizing and voter registration. And this has now become a problem for Democrats. And I guess that's kind of, the first alarming thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that the right is doing right now a better job of organizing in very tangible ways among young voters and on college campuses than Democrats and the left.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not even comparable. And the thing
Really?
is that, not even comparable. I mean, and the thing is, I've been sounding the alarm on our voter registration program for a long time, for about 2 years. I've talked to the DNC about it. I've brought it to different state party chapters. And I was worried because initially, what got me sort of thinking like that this was a big problem was that, we do voter registration drives and GOTV all over the country, like my own personal firm. And every time I would send in canvassers to go to these areas, no matter where it was, I mean, deep red, solid blue, swing states, doesn't matter. Turning Point USA and a lot of the time Scott Preslow's organization, I believe it's called Every Vote Action, were there long before us and long after we were gone. And that to me was really concerning because I was, especially as we were going into a Trump election, but nobody seemed to have any idea about or not even just any idea, but they didn't seem to think that one, that this was a problem, or two, that we should be doing anything about it. So then when the New York Times article dropped this week, where they said that in the 30 states, right, I'm sure that you saw this, in the 30 states that we can determine what party affiliation is for voter registration, we were down in every single one. So I didn't even think it was that bad, honestly, even on the ground. But that shows you that, I mean, they've registered 4.5 million voters since 2020, and we haven't. So,
Okay, so why is this happening? I mean, we know that the Democrats have had a gerontology problem at the very top with the candidates. We've endlessly debated this. Is this a reflection of that basically the entire infrastructure of the party was not paying attention to younger voters, that younger voters were not represented? Just give me your sense of how could the Democrats decide to ignore what they would have said a few years ago was one of their key constituencies?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's less even about that and more so about just this assumption that people are so afraid of Trump that no matter what, we will win elections. And that has proven wrong time and time again. So much so that now what I worry about is that I love what Gavin Newsom's doing 100%.
Okay.
I think that it's a great spectacle. I love it. But I just worry that we're not going to win the redistricting war, right? If we actually truly go to war, I just don't think that we have the numbers to win that. And actually, the New York Times just did an article about this as well that confirmed that theory, that we will likely not win that war. So then the question is, well, how do we beat it without a redistricting war? And the only way we beat it is through voter registration. But the issue is that for some reason, again, we're stuck in this mindset of, oh, well, things just have to get bad enough, right? If Trump does these crazy things like he's doing in DC and all of these executive orders, well, things will just get so crazy that people will fight back. And that's just not what we've seen to be the case. So to me, it's almost like it's maddening because we're doing the same thing over and over again without getting any better results.
Okay, so why is that? Because I mean, I understand that, and I guess if you would have asked me about before 2024. I would have said, well, look, everything I know about Gen Z would be that, they care about climate change. They will reject the kind of sexism, the kind of racism that Donald Trump is doing. They will reject that kind of crazy. But you're telling me that's not happening. Why?
Yeah, it's not happening. And what I think my theory is that what we do know about campaigning is that door-to-door engagement, face-to-face engagement, still even in 2025 with AI and all of the things that we have technology-wise, is still the best way to convert a voter. And so when we're putting a lot of our money into advertising, we're putting a lot of our
Right.
money into virtual, non-tangible things. That's great for the like 3 consultants that get super rich doing this,
Yeah.
but it's not great for political organizing. So I think it's less about that Gen Z is necessarily sexist, racist, like all of
Okay.
the isms that we say that they are, and more about that they are just getting reached out to first. And so
Okay.
because they're getting reached out to, they're changing.
All right. Well, let's talk about also the media diet, because obviously we're dealing with folks who are not getting all of their news from NBC and CBS. They're not watching necessarily. They're not reading the New York Times or the Washington Post. So how is this playing out in I don't want to make this a conversation about TikTok, but is there a different, are they seeing the world in a different way, where what we see as scary and crazy, that they see as kind of exciting and entertaining?
Yes, I think 100. I'm glad you brought this up because
Yeah,
this is the problem. It is not just a ground game problem. I wish it was. I
yeah,
wish it was
yeah.
just simply a ground game problem. But the issue is that we are 15 years behind as a party in saying what Charlie Kirk has done and what these people like Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro have done, where they are marrying the ground game with the online media empire that they have. So, and it is so powerful that one, they have like taken over these algorithms, right? With like TikTok and Instagram and all of these algorithms where they have all of their people on one accord, all the way down
Hmm.
to the very smallest influencers. And they are all on the same page with their messaging all of the time. And we don't do that on the Democratic side. So because we don't have that infrastructure and we don't have that communication or that media empire, it is all disjointed and everywhere. So on any given day, you might have 100 to 300 influencers all talking about different stories or different talking points. And so the kids don't fall into this like red pill pipeline that makes sense for them, where all the messaging is all clear and concise and what they think to be as true. And so that's something we're trying to fix as well at the same time as the ground game is how do we get the influencers, the viral content, and everybody sort of on one accord so that when we do go to college campuses like Charlie does, that they are already getting
The
this
other
content.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say the other Charlie because every once in a while on social media, people confuse me with Charlie Kirk because I guess the name thing, but it's like, no, please do not do that. Okay,
Oh,
so
God.
as alarming as Charlie Kirk is, I think you know the reason why we're having this podcast conversation today. When I met you at the Conference on Liberalism in Washington, D.C., you told me something that really shocked me, but I've asked other people about it, and they've confirmed that you were right about this, that the next big thing coming in terms of influencers for young people is, and I can't even believe that to take this seriously, is Nick Fuentes, who I think people probably recognize the name, but Nick Fuentes is a crypto Nazi without the crypto part. I mean, he is a
Yeah.
Holocaust denier. He's an anti-Semite. I mean, he is as vile as you could possibly get. And so give me some sense that he's rising now on the right. I mean, is there this vortex where it's like you keep needing to move to more and more outrageous positions in order to make the algorithm work for you? I mean, so is Nick Fuentes really a thing?
Yeah, and that's
Really?
part of the issue is
Nazis?
that
Nazis?
yeah,
Fucking
like
Nazis?
and what's scary is that I'm sure that you probably know of Myron Gaines too, right? He does the Uncensored America tour,
No, tell
which
me about
is
him.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's a he's an interesting guy. So he basically, I call him like the grandfather of the Red Pill podcast. He does a podcast called Fresh and Fit, where essentially it's all the things you think, right? Women need to shut up and stay in the kitchen. All relationships should be open, except only on one side. The men can go out and do whatever they want. The women have to take it. Of course, women shouldn't vote. All Jews are evil. The whole thing. the reason I think Myron has not sort of, like, for example, Myron's allowed to go into Charlie Kirk's events where Nick is not allowed to, I
Okay.
think is because he sort of peters this mainstream line where the way that he says it is less aggressive than somebody like Nick would say it, right? So, but he is definitely a neo-Nazi, I mean, for
Okay,
sure.
so what is the possible appeal of these people to young people? Is this like the ultimate transgressive position to take? Is this what it means to be a subversive in 2025? That you're actually
Yeah.
going to hang out with a Holocaust denier?
Yeah, no, I think honestly, I think that unfortunately the algorithms now favor the far right and the far left. And so that's why
Okay,
we're seeing this, which is really sad because it's, I mean, there are so
for
many
me,
brilliant people that are normal that sit in the
yeah,
middle,
yeah.
but the algorithm wants to feed this like rage bait is really the only thing you could call it. And so they grow much faster, they grow easier than normal people.
Okay, but even so, I guess, and maybe I'm showing, this is a generational gap here. Z, we're talking Nazis here. I
I
mean,
know, yeah.
no, no, and I understand this, and this is important to point out to people that I know that these words have been used over and over again. There's been a lot of crying wolf, and I've seen this happen with one phrase after another. And you may disagree with me, but I mean, there was for years when every single Republican, every conservative was accused of being a racist. Mitt Romney was a racist. John McCain was a
Yeah.
racist. The Bushes were a racist. Everybody's a racist. So when the real things came along, people kind of rolled their eyes, they shrugged their shoulders and say, yeah, they become numb. And so, the Nazi, like, he's just as bad as Hitler. Well, now you have a Nick Fuentes who is
Yeah.
an actual neo-Nazi, and people are listening and embracing him. And I'm thinking young people, what is their upbringing that leads them to be open to that? I mean, what is this downstream from? Is it, kids? I'm sorry to engage in some, armchair sociology. Are they're male loneliness? They're maybe reacting against certain things that have happened in their lives. Are they from single parent families? I mean, what is the possible appeal to a young person in this wonderful age of the 2020s going, yeah, I want to hang out with a Holocaust denying Nazi?
Yeah, I
I
honestly, I
don't
think
get
it's
it.
it's hard for me to understand too, but from
Yeah.
what I've sort of read about, and because I watch a lot of Nick's content
Yeah.
because I'm interested to see like what he's saying and how he's bringing people in, and I think it's all of that, all of the things that you mentioned,
Yeah.
plus also like the fact that they feel left behind and they feel like somebody like Nick is not tone policing them, is giving them a safe space to be.
Validating their identity.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I find that we are going to really, really struggle. I still think that Charlie, at least right now, Charlie
Charlie
Kirk
Kirk.
is definitely, and Scott Presler are definitely the majority in terms of their organizing efforts,
Right.
and more dangerous, I think, in many ways. Which I think people would say like that's crazy. Of course, Nick is more dangerous, but Nick is not doing a ground game. Nick is not actually out there setting up college chapters. So once he starts doing that, yes, obviously he'd be more dangerous. But I think at least electorally right now, Charlie
Yeah.
Kirk and Scott Presler are much more dangerous.
Well, and he also doesn't have $100 million behind him, right? I mean, he doesn't have that kind of funding. So what is his? Is he just a social media phenomenon at the moment? Then.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's what, and I mean that's why it's like these people like Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. Yes, they're problematic. I mean, they're people that we want to obviously not influence the youth. But I'm just as an organizer, as a political operative, I'm just like less worried about them. I just don't feel as if they're going to be registering hundreds of thousands of voters or knocking doors for the
Right.
midterm elections.
No, they won't. So you mentioned somebody like Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens, and at one time there were gatekeepers. There were people who said, okay, you're not part of our movement.
Mm.
And one of the strangest, obviously relationships was Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. As Candace Owens drifted off into that weird anti-Semitic fever swamp, she was on his payroll, and he clearly kind of wanted to scrape her off his shoes, didn't he? He wanted to get
Yeah.
rid of her.
Mhm.
And so, but there's no longer any sort of a mechanism, is there, to close the door? Because, I mean, Charlie Kirk would be in a position, you would think, well, I'll ask you, is he in a position to close the door on Nick Fuentes? Says, okay, we're crazy, we're all MAGA, but that's way too far. Is there anyone who
Yeah.
has that ability?
Yeah. Well, and he has with Nick. So
He's
I know that
tried.
there. Yeah, he's trying. I mean, now everybody's asking, oh, why won't you debate Nick and all, and we'll see, I guess, like how the pressure sort of builds on him. But I think what will be very interesting to see is that what happens at AmFest this year, because apparently
What
Nick
is
is meant to.
AmFest?
It's like the big Republican Super Bowl event. We're going to
Mm.
be there as the Unfuck America tour. We have our own space that we're renting out across the street, and we're going to be doing debates and all of that. But Nick is supposed to be crashing that event, and I think it's going to be interesting to see some of that Republican infighting, which obviously isn't the worst thing for us as Democrats because, I mean, there is having some pushback internally in their party is good. The problem, again, becomes if that actually translates into ground game. That's where I think that our real issue is going to be.
So you've gotten Charlie Kirk's attention, right? I mean, these guys know about what you're doing with ground game, and they've pushed back against you, correct?
Yes, yeah, they have. Yeah, Charlie definitely knows me.
Okay, so who's more mad at you, Charlie Kirk or fellow progressive? Because you mentioned and here it comes, the Unfuck tour. By the way, who came up with that term? I mean, I like it. I'm going to make it clear.
I have to give one of my staffers credit actually for this one. I don't know if he wants me to mention his name or not, so I'll keep it out. But one of my staffers did, and I think it was a good decision.
So, I mean, one of the things that we've seen and we're shifting to this other, one of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years, after George Floyd, during the COVID era, was that a lot of the major progressive organizations were beset by infighting, and there was a lot of implosion. There was a lot of finger pointing. There was a lot of you're engaging in microaggressions. People who have purity agendas that are out there, and you experienced that as well with Unfucked America. I listened to a fascinating podcast about how Unfucked America became fucked. And I apologize for the language, but I don't know how to talk about this otherwise. And so there isn't this other dynamic, which I think is important, that you have the rising right, being very aggressive, out there pounding on the doors, doing all this, raising lots of money. Whereas my sense is that you have a lot of progressive organizations that are late to the game, but also much more interested in fighting with one another and engaging in, I'm the biggest victim grievance fest. So can you just give me a little background? Because you had a really successful event, and, what's the short version of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, so the short version basically was that our first stop was at Texas A&M University, so the biggest school in the country. It was very successful. We had about over 100 million organic views on social media. So we
of this
really
live stream. Yeah.
So it was actually our videos. So our live streams were really big as well, but our videos themselves that our creators posted were getting millions and millions of views. One of them, Dean Withers' video, I think got like almost 50 million views,
Right.
which is probably one of the biggest like political pieces of content out there. And so it was really successful. We raised a bunch of money. Charlie was talking about us, all of the things. And then everything imploded because of some random TikTok live with people that don't really have even big followings, basically said that we were not uplifting Black voices and that we were only uplifting white voices. And my response to that, which I mean, maybe I regret, maybe I don't, was that the whole point of us like picking Dean and Parker at the time, who were two young 22-year-old college boys, was that we're speaking to that demographic. So obviously we want to have people that look like them, speak like them, because that's the demographic we're going after. Now, if we end up going after young Hispanic women, we would get a young Hispanic woman, right? And they did not like that answer. That was not a good enough answer. And so they proceeded to take down the whole tour because of that. And we didn't let them. We basically said, okay, you want to leave, you want to do that, fine. Go ahead. But we're going to continue. We're going to go to, and then we actually 2 months later completely sold out our venue in Tampa at the Student Action Summit. We raised more money than we ever had. We had CNN coverage. It really was even more successful. And I think that the reason why it was more successful that we continued is that people were like, who the hell do these people think they are? Like, what do you mean we can't cancel you? Yes, we can. And I think that in itself, and it's actually happening now as we speak. I posted a video yesterday saying that leftists are not on our team. And so don't pretend and when I say leftists, I mean people that are telling other voters not to vote for Democrats because Republicans and Dems are the same, right? People like Cenk Uygur, people like this. And that has blown up overnight. That people are really angry about that, calling me all sorts of things. But I think that if we're going to fight this, then we got to be honest about where we are as a party,
So you were uncancelable. Now, just for people's background here, when you talk about, leftists, that you dropped out of graduate school to begin helping with the Bernie Sanders, 26 campaign, and you ran part of AOC's field program. So you're not like a squishy Democrat. So this illustrates, I think, part of the problem that you would describe yourself as pretty solidly progressive, right?
Oh, yeah. I'd consider myself a far leftist, honestly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the problem is you're not lefty enough. And so you're accused of microaggressions. And there are these purity tests that again, cause people to roll their eyes. But we're also at a moment now where I guess a lot of our listeners are going to go, given the threat that we are seeing from the Trump administration, there are troops, on the streets of Washington, D.C. He's about to occupy Chicago. I mean, one thing after another. We have the masked ICE agents moving, the president, musing about lots of people like dictators and all of this sort of thing. And yet there are these factions. How much of this has to do with the controversy about Israel and Palestine? Because, you really saw kind of a breakdown, I think, of some of the traditional coalitions on college campuses. How much of a problem is that for
it's a huge,
Democrats? Okay. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, because the infighting has always been bad, right? But I think this new emergence of Palestine and Israel has really just completely shaken up the whole party. Because it's almost as if you can be the furthest left person you've ever met. You could say, I don't want borders, ACAB, all the things, right? But if you say, I don't have a position on Palestine and Israel, then you are the enemy, right? And
canceled.
And this is part of the issue is that we are finding reasons to shrink our tent. And in a time where we should be expanding our tent, this is where my personal frustration comes in, because I'm like, listen, we can all have our own beliefs and that's fine. Whether you're Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or whatever the hell you are, we can battle that out in the primaries and that's fine. That's what the primaries are for. But the issue becomes when you're saying, oh, well, if you don't believe in 100% of what I believe, then you don't deserve to be here. Well, then that's how we get Trump.
Well, literally, that's how you got Trump. So give me some insight into this. Some of these folks that you were talking about, wouldn't support Joe Biden, would not support Kamala Harris in 2024 because of her position on Israel and Palestine, and they got Trump, and we've seen what's happened since then. Any sense of remorse or well, that didn't work out well? No, because what? Because it's like we are the righteous ones, and
Exactly. Yeah, we're righteous, we're good, and this is where I find the biggest, and this is why I tweeted yesterday that leftists aren't on our team, and people seem to be angry and confused and frustrated by that. But the issue is becoming that if you don't believe in winning electorally is important, then we can't work on the same team. Right. And I think that politicians, Ken Martin himself, I hate to say it because, I support Ken Martin. all of that. But Ken Martin, you can tell that he has this like significant pressure on him right now to listen to the far left that aren't even voting in elections. So it's like, to me, it's like, if you're the chair of the Democratic Party, what should your job be? Your job should be to expand the tent, to make sure that our ground game is as strong as it's ever been so that we can win electorally. And instead, what I think is happening is that he's so terrified of this, like, leftist online that is, saying if you don't believe in free Palestine, then all of a sudden, you are the devil. And it's actually like, now it is affecting our actual ground game. Because in the past, I think people,
I can see that,
like, especially, they were in positions like that. They were like, okay, if you're the far left and you say that, whatever, you're a Bernie supporter, go kick rocks, right? But now that's not the case.
Well, I understand that my opinion is not going to be welcome here, being, a cisgendered white male and everything. But I will say that I was watching one of these navel gazing sessions where progressives were going at one another, and it was like, who was the bigger victim, and it felt like kind of almost like a re-education camp where certain people had to come forward and confess their sins and ask for absolution and for forgiveness, and there was the lack of sort of not a lot of specificity, but a lot of feelings that needed to be validated. And I thought, oh my God, this is 2025. We are in the middle of what I think a lot of us regard as an existential crisis, and we have some. And this is a phrase from the before time. These were the snowflakes. This was the call out culture. And you know what? It would be hard to put together a movement behind that would be successful. So you're in the position, you and others, and again, you're not a squishy, centrist here. You're in the position of not only fighting against the Charlie Kirks and the Nick Fuentes of the world, but the purists on the left who regard any sort of disagreement or conversation as microaggressions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is part of the problem. You can't, how do you talk your way out of that? So what's the answer? What's the answer? Because this is your job, right?
I'm still trying to figure that out every day, to be honest, because I think that, you're right. Like, we're fighting all sides. We're fighting the inside of the party. We're fighting MAGA, we're fighting the neo-Nazis. And what my hope is that we cut the cancer out of the party and we just move on. Because to me, it's like, okay, if you're not voting anyway, right? Like, why are you then making these fundamental decisions that are going to lead us into, where we're already at, which is a dictatorship? And so it's frustrating to me to see the leadership at the top of the Democratic Party even entertaining this stuff. And that's where I really hope that there's a change there. And I hope that if it's not me, then somebody stands up and says, actually, we need to fight electorally now, and we need to stop this like purity testing nonsense, because even I get sick of it, right? Like, and I'm a soy lefty, I'm the land acknowledgement lefty, right? So to me, it's if I'm getting to the point where I feel like this is too much, then imagine what a cisgender white male college student feels.
Well, or old guys who actually vote.
Yeah, or old guys.
In a swing state. Okay, so just in the few minutes we have, I wanted to double back. So you actually like what Gavin Newsom is doing, because it is interesting to me that Democrats have been, trying to find their voice. They've been throwing a lot of stuff up against it. Newsom clearly was experimenting with a lot of things. Didn't he sit down with Charlie Kirk, of all people, for his podcast, which I thought was a singularly bad idea. But now he's like, seems to be embracing the troll persona. Just give me your sense of that, and whether that's going to change the way other Democrats respond.
I love it. I don't know if it's going to change the way other Democrats respond, but I really hope that it does, because I think that one of our biggest issues with the media infrastructure that we were talking about is that Democrats seem to be 15 years behind in everything, including inserting pop culture into our media, right? Like, so we don't have any sense at all of like the current pop culture and what it means and how to infiltrate that into the current media infrastructure, whereby Gavin is actually getting it now. And he's saying, okay, I'm actually going to change and it's working for him, right? His engagement is insanely high. And I hope, I'm not confident because I just don't think that, again, we're always so far behind the eight ball that I just worry that like we're not going to see that. But I really hope that they do.
Zee Cohen-Sanchez is the founder of the Political Action Committee National Ground Game. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to support what you're doing?
Yeah, please go to our website, either nationalgroundgame.com, or you can go to, if you want to support the tour directly, unfuckamericatour.com. You could sign up to volunteer. You could sign up to donate. We're creating college chapters all over the country. And of course, if you have more questions, email us at the info email. So info at National Ground Game or info at the Unfuck America Tour.
Zee, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it very much. And thank you all for listening to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. You know why we do this, why we're going to continue to do this, because now more than ever, as you can tell from this conversation, it is important to remind ourselves that we are not the crazy ones. Thank you.